Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today, continuing on from the videos that I made about Alien, Fate of the Nostromo, I'm going to carry on with the theme of one of the most popular science fiction franchises ever produced. And I'm going to talk to you today about Gale Force Nine's Aliens, Another Glorious Day in the Call. Now, this is by no means the first of the games that has been produced ever since the films came out. There have only been a handful of board games, one or two in the dim and distant past, I think in the 80s, made a bit of a splash. But thereafter, there was nothing much. A few years ago, a company called Prodos Games produced a line called AVP, but it was rather badly let down by the company not really supporting customers or the game itself, from what I understand. Now, I came into possession of that game secondhand, and it's not a bad game, but I can see why people complained, and it did have its issues that require fixing. So, what sets this one apart from those early efforts? Well, I'm going to come straight out and say that if you are a fan of Aliens, this game is probably the closest anyone has come to producing perfection. And I mean that. This game is brilliant. It plays well. The components are simply gorgeous. There is so much chrome here for a fan of Aliens. It's a very well designed, very well thought out game. It's certainly challenging, I can tell you that, having played it quite a few times now. I would highly recommend this thing. It only came out a couple of years ago, so it's still very new and very easy to find. And rather sensibly, Gale Force 9 has not swamped it with endless expansions. So I'm really going to show you the components and talk briefly about the gameplay. We'll start with the components first, but just to give you a breakdown of what's available, this game, which is based in its entirety on the movie Aliens, you're effectively, most of the time, playing through the narrative of that mission as the Colonial Marines trying to end the xenomorph threat and save, well, let's face it, the one surviving civilian from the Hadley's Hope colony, and that's young Newt. So what I've got here is the box for the core game. As you can see, beautifully produced. This is classic Gale Force 9. They produce beautiful games. You can have a glimpse of the board on the back. You get a certain number of starting characters. Not all of them, mind. In the base game, you get the critical characters of Ripley and Newt, and a selection of Marines, but you'll notice that you only got one of the two smart gunners. You've got Vasquez. You don't have the sinister corporate guy, Burke. He's not in this one, but there is the first of two expansions, Ultimate Badasses, which of course gives you the balance of the Colonial Marines. You can see the figures there. By the way, the photos do not lie. I'll show you in a bit. These guys are every bit as good as they appear in the picture. And as it says, in addition to various rules and bits and pieces, you get 6 hard plastic characters. No, correction. You get 5 hard plastic characters and 1 wussy plastic self-serving corporate guy. But anyway, that's just my prejudice coming through. So Ultimate Badasses adds more characters, as well as some additional rules and different play modes to the game. And the final one, which really completes the ensemble, is Get Away From Her, you... Shall I say it? No. These reviews are not for kids, but they've taken the trouble to blank out bruh. So, Get Away From Her, you... which of course gives you the escape from the atmosphere processor and the final closing mission on board the USS Sulaco, where yes, you can actually, as Ripley or any of the other characters, get into the power loader and have a showdown with the Queen. This expansion also introduces the ability to play as the alien side. Now, in the first two games, you play as the Colonial Marines, and the game system controls the xenomorphs. The second expansion gives you the opportunity to have an alien player. So that's great. It adds a load of flexibility to an already brilliant game. But if you'll pardon me for a second, shuffling things round down here, I'm going to spend most of this video showing you what's in the box. Before I do, I'm just going to quickly explain how the game works. So each turn, your Marines will perform a certain number of actions. There's a card-driven element to this game, so you'll find that it's a mix of miniatures and card management. Also dice rolling, because of course there's a certain amount of weapons fire and movement regulation. All these systems are cleverly blended together. So each turn your Marines will be taking a certain number of actions to try and get to where they need to be, find what they need to find, sometimes perform specific tasks before they're then able to withdraw and the mission ends. Towards the end of each Marine round, the aliens will get to go. The aliens are divided into different categories. So there's alien models, which represent aliens that you've sighted, and there's blip tokens. Players of Space Hulk will be very familiar with the blip token mechanism, where the blip will have a number on the reverse, and you've got a contact on the map where you don't actually know how many aliens it represents until you actually encounter it or use one of the terminals to access the base's camera system so you can see what's coming. It's very cleverly modelled, but I'll get onto that in more detail later. But for now, the components. I'll start off with a health warning. Expect some assembly. This is not a game you can play straight out of the box. The Marines and the aliens come as unassembled miniatures, and you do have to assemble them. If you're not a model maker, this could be a problem, because I've built a number of models in miniatures in my time, and it did take me a while to get this game ready to play. You get, in each set where it's relevant, the assembly instructions for putting your Marines and your xenomorphs together. As you can see, some of them, like the Alien Queen, are actually pretty involved. You know, I would recommend using super glue, because some of the lesser model glue brands, they might not set fast enough or effectively enough, because bear in mind you're going to be handling these things once they're assembled, so that you need something fairly robust to hold them together. From my experience, the most involved and somewhat heartbreaking element was getting the aliens done, because there are a lot of xenomorphs. The Marines are interesting to put together because they're all individuals, they're characters, you know, it's quite fun to see them come together. The aliens, you do get interchangeable tails, arms, legs, heads, but at the end of the day, they're a mass of xenomorphs. So to me, at any rate, that was a far less interesting part of the process. But it is worth it, because once you assemble them, the minis are really, really neat, and they do have the character name on the miniature. So that's the colour they come moulded in, a fairly bright green for the Marines and a black for the xenomorphs. I haven't painted my xenomorphs yet. I will get round to it at some point. But to be perfectly honest, they look pretty decent as built, especially if you play this game in low light, which you can. They look the part. I might just paint the decking under their feet if it comes to it. So that is my undercoated Ripley, who is ready to go. That's Ripley from the basic game. You also have, if you go for the expansions, and this is how much chrome there is for people who are fans of the story, you have Enraged Ripley, who's decided she's going to go into the hive and rescue Newt. And look at that. She has her special homemade flamer come pulse rifle hybrid, and she's carrying Newt. I'm not sure the camera's picking it up very well, but the sculpting on that model is amazing, as indeed they all are. see if I can find a fully painted model. Yeah, there is Drake, one of the two smart gunners on the Marine squad. I have painted him, and that was great fun. Painting all the Marines was awesomely good fun. You have, of course, little Rebecca, popularly known as Newt, saluting and going, affirmative. And the guy everyone loves to hate is the most recent mini I painted, Burke Carter J. One thing you will find as you play this game, it is so beautifully structured, and there are so many awesome nods to the fans that you will find yourself quoting from the movies as you play this game. That's how good it is. So what else do you get besides the minis, which need a fair bit of assembly? Well, you get your location boards. So this is part of the USS Sulaco. The boards are double-sided, so you've got a bit of the colony here. I think that's part of the atmosphere processor, and that's the egg chamber that Ripley finds herself in the film. Of course, the landing bay with the nose of your UD-4 Cheyenne dropship. More atmosphere processor. So if you get the basic game and the expansion, you end up with 8 boards, double-sided. Which is great because you can play all the missions that there are in the game. You can play the entire story the whole way through. You can play generic missions that the game comes with, or you can even fashion your own. The system is that adaptable. And so for each mission, you get a setup map. It's all beautifully displayed, tells you exactly what you need to know. Starting blip positions, starting marine positions. There's a handy little key. Any special rules on the reverse. And it's the same format with the expanded missions. In fact, if you play a mission in the basic game, the maps tend to be smaller and have fewer things on them. That is the first mission where you have to go and find Newt with the expansion, the get away from her, you expansion. So the map has increased by a third in size, and there's a lot more going on. So there's a lot of great stuff there. I mean, these things are a little flimsy, but they're perfectly fit for purpose. The all-important rule books. The rules in this game are beautifully written, beautifully presented. Very high quality rule book. It's nice, glossy, very attractively illustrated, and it stands up to heavy usage. I've had this rule book next to the games we've played them because it has this awesome expanded turn order on it, and so you do need this to get by. But rulebook, no complaints about it. There were very few queries, if any, and they were resolved very quickly on the first play. The same applies to the rules for the expansions, and in fact, to be honest, if you're only getting the Marine expansion, that's all the extra rules it brings you for a ton of add-on gameplay. If I haven't said it already, and I think I have, this game is extremely well thought out. Now, each player has a character card, so here's dear old Ripley. The stats are very simply presented. Everything you need to know is there. Any special rules are listed, and you've got little slots on the side for equipment and weapons cards. The organisation's brilliant. You can appreciate at a glance what your character can do and what they're carrying. And very cleverly, because this game is best played with a full Marine squad, I'd say a minimum of 6 figures. With the expansions, you can accommodate as many as 8. But of course, you don't want to be micromanaging that number of people. So a very clever mechanism this game introduces is grunt mode. So if Ripley's on that side, you can control her, but she's not your player character in that sense. So on this side, you're directly controlling Ripley. If she's flipped over, then she's just a grunt. She has limited functions. She can still do what you tell her. She still takes 2 actions every turn like a normal character. But it simplifies things for someone who's playing solitaire, or if there's only 2 or 3 of you, but you need to have that full squad. Very simple, very clever. I love that they have quotes from the film on the cards. And to me, that is a real winner. It just goes to show another example of the love that's gone into this game. It is a homage to the films, and it is a very well executed homage. Carter Burke. So those are some of the civilians. And then you get, of course, the Colonial Marines themselves. Jeez, that jump scared me. Yeah, all the characters in this game have unique strengths and weaknesses, and they all feel and play very differently. Again, with the Marines, it follows their specialization and their particular training. So you have your smart gunners, you have like Vasquez, you have your flamer guy, Frost, for example. You've got ordinary riflemen like Hicks and Hudson. They all feel like their characters should. I mean, Hudson has a high tech rating because he tends to be the one who runs bypasses and accesses the computer. So I love it. It's great. In addition to that, I'll just show you what we call the biscuits. Those are your accuracy trackers. So each character has an aim rating, which decreases every time they fire on their turn. So your chances of scoring a hit every time you fire will go down. So you may have a pulse rifle and you may blaze away with it, but it comes at a cost. And I love that these look like the ammunition trackers on the M41 pulse rifles. Again, a simple aesthetic choice, so evocative. Here we have the cards. The cards comprise a mix of, again, gorgeous illustrations, stills from the movies. They are equipment cards, weapon cards. These are bad news, hazard cards, you don't want them. More weapons, event cards. Some of them help and hinder you. But another mechanic that I love is that the deck of cards you have also acts as a gauge of your squad's remaining stamina and ammunition. So every time you perform an action or purchase things, your deck, your cards are moved to an exhaust pile. And if you don't rest every now and then to refresh some of your cards, if you have to lose them from the exhaust pile, they go to the discard pile and thus out of play. If your squad runs out of cards, you've basically run out of puff, out of morale, out of ammunition, whatever. The fact is you are no longer functional as a unit. It's a very clever mechanism because it forces you to keep an eye on your resource management. There's also the dreaded motion tracker deck, which is another very evocative thing. I love that you get some hint of what's coming by the number of pips on the card, but of course you don't know until you turn it over. This is one of the nastier ones. They're inside the perimeter. That opens holes right next to you, right next to your model. You might think you've secured a room, and against most of the cards you might have done, but if one of these turns up, then thematic and true to the film, that room wasn't as secure as you thought it was. Now, I've mentioned the cards that control your stamina and your ammunition supply and your general will to continue. That is a great mechanism, but trust me, this game is hard. Like any good solitaire game, it's hard to beat. You will struggle to win this game, even if you tweak it unofficially to try and make to give yourself a fighting chance more than anything else. It's very tough, it's very uphill. I'd say I've won about a third of the games I've played so far, but I love it because it keeps you coming back for more. You get so close sometimes. And believe me, more often than not, the game will not end with you running out of endurance cards, as they're called. These these fellas that I showed you earlier. It won't be running out of endurance that kills you. It will be disappearing under a tide, and I mean a tide of those things. Because if you do not kill them or keep them under control to a sufficient degree, you will get overrun. But at the same time, you have to balance your actions, because you cannot afford to just sit around killing aliens all day. The game does not reward that. You will run out of endurance, even if you build up an effective fire base, you know, the perfect ambush point. If you're not accomplishing your mission, it's all over. You're far, far better off getting in there quick, doing what you're supposed to do, getting out again. The only time in any of the missions that you should even think about just making it a fight to the death is if you're doing what they call the bug hunt missions. And these are based on your classic last man standing scenario. They're for the real masochists, because a bug hunt involves you being plonked on the map with no exits and nothing but a pistol. You have to run around, find weapons, equip your Marines, and fight off the xenomorphs until the motion tracker deck runs out. In a regular mission game, the motion tracker deck recycles endlessly, so you never run out of xenomorphs. In a bug hunt, you can fight them to a standstill. So there, in a nutshell, is a very broad overview of the game and what you get with it and how awesome it is. I am just going to show you 3 things before I leave you, because I realise I've nattered on for a bit, just to show you how much, again, despite the fact I've already done this, but I can't resist, especially if any of you are still wavering about whether you want to get this game. If you're Aliens fans, do. Do you recognise these? These are the doors in the Sulaco's docking bay that Ripley has to consecutively open to drop the alien queen out into space. You can take her out that way if you wish to. And for those of you who want to drive the APC, they have given you an APC. Check it out. We've got an APC. You can drive it, man its weapons, fry half the city with this puppy. But yeah, you've got a really nice graphic. Once you've parked it and you've disembarked, if you want something that looks a bit better than that, by all means flip it and you have a beautiful top down of the APC. So, just to sum up, this is an awesome game. Even if you're not a fan of the Aliens universe, this is an awesome game. It's got rather deep, thinky, puzzle-solving moments. It has, puzzle solving in the sense of how do you manage your limited resources and maximize your capabilities, because they're both in fairly short supply in this game. It has nail-bitingly tense moments where you have no idea where another bunch of aliens are going to spawn and rush you. It's extremely tense, nowhere is truly secure, and you have the most awesome firefights and the biggest groan moments as your characters get overwhelmed and killed or captured. It's just so tense, so entertaining, so thrilling. And as you've seen, it's beautifully constructed, really, really beautifully constructed. If you are a fan of Aliens, you will adore this game. I think there's a lot to love in it. I can't guarantee it. Like every game, there's probably 1 or 2 people who won't get on with it for whatever reason, but everyone I've played this game with loves it. And I've yet to actually meet in person anyone who doesn't. People complain that it's hard, and it is. And there's 1 or 2 niggly things that they don't like, but I'll touch on those in the next video because I've gone on for quite long enough. So that's my introduction to Aliens. I'll follow this up with a sample turn or 2 of a game in progress so you can see how the game actually operates, and probably revisit it again with some final thoughts after that. But in the meantime, I hope this has whetted your appetite for the next video. This game can be obtained quite reasonably for what it is, and I would, as always with games I favour, strongly recommend giving it a try if you can, or buying yourself a copy. Watch out for the model building element, because that is an unavoidable thing. Even if you don't paint the miniatures, you still have to build them. But that aside, this is a wonderful achievement, and I think it is an awesome game, and I look forward to getting the demonstration video done for you. Thank you for tuning in.